Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's deep dive. When we watch the beautiful game, it's super easy to just see 22 players chasing a ball on a patch of grass. But beneath the surface, the history of football tactics is actually this intense, high-stakes, intellectual chess match between grandmaster managers. Every formation, every system, every shift in philosophy, it's all been a calculated move to completely outsmart the opponent. Today, we're going to unpack exactly how that arms race has evolved over the decades and how it's fundamentally changed what we require from the players themselves.
So, what comes to mind when you hear the word unbeatable? For a really long time, the focus in football was pretty much just on physical prowess, right? Who can run the fastest, who can jump the highest, who puts in the strongest tackle. But I want you to reconsider what truly drives evolution on the pitch. Is it just the legs of the players, or is it something way deeper? Okay, let's dive into this, because the answer lies in understanding how problems on the pitch have historically been solved.
Part 1. The Tactical Arms Race. To figure out where the game is today, we have to recognize a fundamental truth about football history. Literally, every single tactical innovation was born as a direct solution to a previous problem. No one's just inventing a new tactic for the fun of it. They're doing it out of absolute necessity to survive and win. We're going to track these eras of tactical dominance, starting in the 1930s with the WM formation, then moving into the ultra-defensive era of Catenaccio in the 1960s, and finally arriving at the revolutionary total football of the 1970s. Each of these eras completely rewrote the rules of the game.
Let's start with Herbert Chapman at Arsenal in the 1930s. At the time, the standard football formation was this highly aggressive 2-3-5. Yeah, you heard that right, 5 attackers. It was heavily focused on dribbling, but Chapman realized that if he dropped players deep into a 3-2-2-3 shape, which, if you picture it, literally looks like a W sitting right on top of an M, he could absorb all that offensive pressure. His team would sit deep, let the opponent have the ball in the Arsenal half, and then, boom, the moment they won it back, they'd attack with blistering pace and quick passing. It was basically the first true prototype of a highly effective counter-attacking system.
Part 2. The Rise of Catenaccio. Fast forward a few decades, the attacking speed of counter-attacking systems like the WM eventually created a whole new problem. How on earth do you stop them? You needed a drastic, hyper-defensive solution, and this defensive necessity birthed Catenaccio. The word literally translates to door bolt in Italian. So, the crucial point is, it originated from Swiss coach Karl Rappan in the 1930s with his Verrou system, but it was brought to Italy and perfected into a ruthless art form. It was all about locking the door to your goal and throwing away the key.
The mechanics of this system were just fascinating. The core pillars involved strict man-to-man marking, meaning every single defender was tightly glued to an opposing attacker. But the true genius here was the introduction of the libero, or the sweeper. This player sat entirely free, just roaming behind the main defensive line. If an attacker somehow slipped past their marker, the sweeper was right there as a safety net to clean up the loose ball. Teams would just grind out results and frustrate opponents to no end.
But listen, it wasn't just about parking a bus in front of the goal. Look at this incredible quote from Helenio Herrera, the legendary manager of the Grande Inter side in the 1960s. He said, "They forgot to include the attacking principles that my Catenaccio included. I also had Facchetti, the first fullback to score as many goals as a forward." Herrera's Inter was defensively invincible, for sure, but they used incredibly fast, overlapping fullbacks to strike on the counter with lethal speed. It was organized, it was disciplined, and it was absolutely brutal.
Part 3. Total football takes over.
For a while, that door bolt seemed totally unbreakable. But the beautiful game is an arms race, remember? Herrera's invincible system was eventually ripped to shreds by a mind-bending new paradigm. And this brilliantly illustrates the clash of philosophies. Catenaccio's rigid positions and strict man-marking against total football's fluid positioning, zonal defense, and aggressive pressing. The inventors of total football realized something simple but devastating. If your entire defensive system relies on man-marking specific players in specific zones, what happens if the attackers just constantly swap positions? The answer is total chaos. The strict man-marking of Catenaccio became entirely useless against fluid positional swapping.
Now, the initial crack in the door bolt actually happened in 1967 when Jock Stein's highly offensive Celtic defeated Inter. But the final nail in the coffin? That came from Rinus Michels and his legendary Ajax side. Michels took those ideas of fluid movement and perfected them into total football. Once players began interchanging roles freely, where a right back could suddenly pop up as a center forward, the era of rigid tactics officially died.
The philosophy of total football was beautifully simple in theory. No outfield player is fixed in their nominal role. Anyone can assume the duties of an attacker, a midfielder, or a defender, just depending on how the play unfolds. Now, while this fluidity is incredible to watch, it creates a massive new problem for the players themselves. To pull this off, players now had to process a truly chaotic amount of visual and spatial information in real time.
Part 4. Defining football intelligence. And this brings us perfectly to the modern era, because fluid dynamic tactics, they are absolutely impossible to execute without elite cognitive game intelligence. Having a strong physical body is just no longer enough. The mind has to be razor sharp. To truly understand how players process these modern tactics, we have to turn to modern sports science. Douglas Jacobson from the Swedish School of Sport and Health Sciences conducted this phenomenal study. He interviewed elite professional coaches from around the world to finally pin down exactly what football intelligence actually means on the pitch. Let's move and see how this builds by breaking down these dense academic components into really digestible pieces. The coaches identified 4 major pillars of intelligence. First, anticipation, using pattern recognition to predict the play before it even happens. Second, prioritize perception, filtering out all the noise to find the vital stimuli. Third, speed of process, preparing your solutions in a split second. And fourth, contextual relation, adapting your decisions based on the actual context of the match, like the score or what minute it is on the clock. I absolutely love this quote from one of the elite coaches interviewed in the study. They said, finding a priority information in that jungle where you have a lot of information, that's maybe the real intelligence. Think about it. A football pitch is literally a jungle of sensory overload. You've got 21 other players moving around, a ball flying, thousands of fans screaming. The truly brilliant players scan the pitch and instantly discard the useless information. They only perceive exactly what they need to make the right move. And that leads directly into the context of the game. True intelligence is adapting to the demands of the specific match situation. Let me give you a quick example. A player might see a glorious opportunity for a brilliant defense-splitting pass. But wait, if it's the 90th minute and their team is holding on to a narrow 1-0 lead, actually, scratch that. Making that risky pass is a terrible, unintelligent decision. The specific game context demands keeping possession and just killing the clock. Context is everything.
Part 5. Developing the football mind.
So if this cognitive game intelligence is basically the holy grail of modern football, how do we actually get it? Well, the research shows that game intelligence isn't just something you're miraculously born with. It is actively constructed on the training ground. Coaches follow this specific methodology. First, they recreate highly realistic game situations. Second, they use role-based functional training, meaning players train in the exact positions they'll occupy in a real match. And third, they provide cognitive tools for understanding the game, rather than just standing there shouting instructions.
Notice the heavy emphasis on realism here. As Coach 8 explains, to develop anticipation, you have to train in an environment that is as specific to a match as possible. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how you literally have to incorporate game rules like offsides during practice if you want players to recognize patterns naturally. If the environment isn't authentic, the brain just won't learn the proper cues for the real match. It's that simple.
The best coaches today don't just stand on the sidelines feeding players all the answers. They provide tools. They teach players how to identify opponent weaknesses, how to scan for emerging spaces, and how to create numerical superiorities in specific zones. They guide the players, sure, but they intentionally leave room for the players to discover creative solutions for themselves. It's called discovery learning, and it makes the lesson stick permanently in the player's mind.
This quote from Coach 4 perfectly summarizes the whole modern coaching philosophy. To make intelligent players, we should give them appropriate tools so they can know as much as possible and react on their own. The managers of today aren't just drill sergeants obsessing over fitness, they're educators. They are training minds just as much as they are training bodies.
Which brings us right back to our original question. From the rigid WM formations to the doorbolt of Catenaccio, and then into the fluid chaos of total football, the game has constantly demanded more and more from its athletes. But as we've seen, the true differentiator today isn't physical at all. So I'll leave you with this. Is the ultimate evolution of football found in the legs of the players or inside their minds? Next time you watch a match, don't just watch the ball. Watch the players scanning the pitch, processing that jungle of information, and playing that invisible game of chess. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your minds as sharp as your tactics.